in the vast quietude of the hidden rain village, shrouded by mist and distant thunder. A boy with a half-scarred face stared blankly at the falling water. Obito Uchiha, once a naive and bright-eyed child, stood at the edge of the precipice between two worlds, the world that had long since crumbled in front of him, and the world that Madara had promised to create. Yet somewhere beneath the silence, behind the swirling Sharingan, and the weight of masked identities, a heartbeat pulsed with questions he had never truly allowed himself to ask. What if he simply stopped? The moment didn't arrive with any grand revelation or spoken clarity. It came like the rain, softly, endlessly. One evening, after another mission carried out with precision and quiet ruthlessness, Obito sat by himself in the base, watching droplets glide down stone walls. In his hand, he held a small, broken pendant, Rin's. He always carried it with him, tucked away, forgotten, yet never truly absent. The ache in his chest throbbed the same way it always had. But now, with Nagato slowly spiraling, Konan whispering more and more about the cost of their ideals, and Madara's voice a constant hum in the back of his mind, something new crept in. Doubt. He remembered her eyes, not just in the last moments, not just in that blur of tragedy, but the real ones, filled with quiet compassion, with unshakable loyalty. Would she have wanted this? He thought he knew the answer. He had built an entire world atop the belief that her death had proven the ugliness of reality. But maybe he had twisted her memory, used it like a shield, a justification for his descent. Obito didn't speak that night. He simply stood up, left the base, and didn't return. Madara's whispers echoed behind him, urging, questioning, even commanding. But the boy who had once wanted to be Hokage kept walking, deeper into the rain. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stay. Every step felt like peeling away the armor he had worn for so long. Zetsu's voice faded. The mask slipped off. The weight lightened. Days turned into weeks. Obito wandered the fringes of the shinobi world, cloaked not in illusion, but in thought. He avoided major roads, kept his chakra hidden, watched the changing world from afar. He saw villages rebuild. He watched children laugh. He saw things he had tried so long to convince himself no longer existed. Kindness, perseverance, hope. And a feeling began to stir in him. Not quite regret, not yet redemption, but the faintest desire to do something different. In the hidden leaf, Kakashi had grown, older, wearier, haunted, yet still standing. Obito watched him from the shadows once, during a mission where Kakashi protected a small team of genin. The copy ninja moved with quiet authority, his eye sharper than ever, his movements precise. But what struck Obito was the moment after the mission, when Kakashi sat alone beneath a tree, holding a small book in one hand, and Rin's name etched on a kunai in the other. The pain was still there, and Obito realized maybe he wasn't the only one still hurting. Back in the rain-soaked outskirts, Obito encountered Konan. She had followed the faintest traces of his chakra, puzzled by his sudden disappearance, unsure what she would find. They met beneath a torn paper umbrella, silence stretching long between them before words were even attempted. Konan looked at him, not as an enemy or a comrade, but as a human being. Her voice was soft. "Why did you leave?" Obito didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. Konan was a creature of grief, too. She understood the things unsaid. Together, they sat beneath the umbrella, not speaking of war or peace or plans. Just rain. Just memories. Just silence. When Obito finally spoke, it was with the quiet conviction of a man who had seen too much, done too much, and now carried it like a stone in his chest. "I thought I was saving the world, but I was only trying to save myself." Konan didn't reply, but she didn't argue either. That was enough. From there, Obito changed. He didn't join any villages, didn't reclaim a name or seek forgiveness, but he moved differently now. Instead of destruction, he began dismantling remnants of Madara's network from the inside, quietly, subtly. He sabotaged cells of rogue Zetsu clones. He intercepted scrolls carrying plans of Akatsuki's deeper plots. When he could, he redirected missions meant to harm into harmless, dead ends. And all the while, he remained a ghost. To the shinobi world, Obito Uchiha had never returned. But shadows whispered of a silent figure, one who turned away from bloodshed, one who watched over border towns, who left supplies at war-torn villages, who once appeared in the middle of a skirmish just to pull a wounded genin out from the rubble and vanish before anyone could speak his name. They called him a myth, a wandering shinobi, a ghost of the old wars. But to Obito, he was only trying to walk a path he should have never strayed from. Not to be a hero, not to make amends, but to remember the boy he once was, the one who smiled, the one who dreamed, and the one who had once believed in the power of light, even if now he walked mostly in shadow. Time moved slowly in the forgotten corners of the shinobi world. The grand battles waged in the heartlands felt like distant echoes here, where the wind whispered through broken trees and the rivers ran silent. Obito kept to these edges, far from the reach of nations, where his presence wouldn't ripple into the chaos he once tried to command. He became something softer in that silence, a watchful ghost, a fading myth. But memory has a way of clinging to those who try to outrun it. There were nights when he still dreamed of her, Rin, her face bathed in moonlight, her smile unclouded by blood. In those dreams, she never blamed him. She only reached for his hand. But in the waking world, he could never quite grasp what it was she wanted him to do. Redemption? peace? Or simply to live again, to truly live? Obito began to test the boundaries of the world he'd once hidden from. He traveled into small villages, cloaked not in genjutsu, but in simple garments, his chakra suppressed to the point of invisibility. No one recognized the man with the single eye and weary face. He was just another traveler, another broken soul, drifting through the aftermath of so many wars. He helped quietly, repairing roofs, mending fences, carrying water to those too frail to lift the pails. The villagers never knew who he was, and Obito never gave a name. But in their eyes, he saw something unfamiliar: trust. Once, in a mountain town, he watched a child try and fail to ignite a spark of flame from her fingertips, struggling with her chakra control. Her friends laughed, not unkindly, and Obito felt something stir inside him, a memory of how hard he had once tried, how clumsy he had been, how his dream of becoming Hokage had felt so impossible, yet burned so brightly. That night, under the stars, he left her a scroll with a simple chakra focus exercise written in his old handwriting. She never knew who left it, but months later, he returned to find her drawing a perfect flame in the night. It made him smile. But peace was never something the world gave freely, especially not to men like him. Word began to spread. Rumors in the underworld of a rogue shinobi dismantling Akatsuki remnants, a former ally turned saboteur, someone who moved like an Uchiha, but without the malice. Zetsu, still lurking in shadows, began sending whispers back to the old hiding places. Something had gone wrong with their lost puppet. Madara's will no longer moved through Obito. And so, danger returned. Obito felt it one night as he camped near the edge of a forest, an unnatural stillness, the kind that only came when the air held more than birds and wind. He didn't need his Sharingan to know they were near. Two Zetsu clones emerged, slithering from the earth like oil, their voices mocking, twisted with disdain. "You've become soft," one of them said, its smile too wide. "Is this what Rin would have wanted? A traitor? A coward who hides in the dirt?" Obito didn't respond. He rose slowly. No mask, no armor. Only his cloak and the weight of his past. He looked the creature in the eye and answered in a voice that didn't shake. "She would have wanted me to stop lying. The fight was short, brutal. He didn't use unnecessary jutsu. He didn't burn them away with fury. He simply dismantled them, piece by piece, precise and cold, not out of vengeance, but duty. These things no longer had a place in the world he was trying to believe in. When it was over, he sat back against a tree, breathing heavily. The forest was quiet again, but he knew now that they were coming. Not just Zetsu, not just the past, but the reckoning he had delayed for too long. Obito understood something fundamental that night. Escaping Madara's plan wasn't enough. Undoing his own part in the cycle of violence required more than just vanishing. He had helped lay the foundation of Akatsuki's terror. He had manipulated Nagato, misled Conan, sent countless lives spiraling into chaos. Even without the mask, even without the lies, the echo of his decisions stretched farther than he could walk. He needed to face it. So he began to move with purpose. His first stop was the hidden rain. He returned not as Toby, not as a shadowy benefactor or puppet master, but as Obito. Conan met him at the edge of the city, her paper wings spread wide, chakra sharp and defensive. But when she saw him, truly saw him, something shifted. The fight she had prepared for melted into wariness, then into something gentler. Recognition. They spoke for hours beneath the crumbling statue of Yahiko, where the rain never quite touched the ground. Obito apologized, not with grand words or shallow remorse, but with honesty. He told her of his choice, of the slow unraveling, of Rin, of Madara, of how he had tried to convince himself he was right, even as the world suffered under the weight of his mistakes. Conan listened. Her expression didn't soften completely, but neither did she strike him down. In her, too, the war had left wounds deeper than words. She told him of Nagato's final days, of his doubt, of his longing to believe in Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who carried dreams the way Yahiko once did. She spoke of peace, not as an ideal, but as a wound she still tried to heal. And in that shared silence, they made an agreement, not an alliance, not forgiveness, but a promise to prevent what remained of their past from poisoning what still might come. Together, they would dismantle the last threads of Madara's lingering web. The real work was just beginning. In the silence that followed their conversation, the hidden rain slowly shifted from being a battlefield of ghosts to a cradle of transition. Obito remained there longer than he expected, helping Conan tend to the wounded villages and repair the crumbling infrastructure left in the wake of Akatsuki's collapse. He never asked for trust, and none was offered easily. But over time, the villagers who once cowered in fear began to recognize his quiet efforts. He no longer carried the presence of a warbringer. He had shed that skin. By day, Obito worked rebuilding what he had once torn down. By night, he wandered the towers of Ame, haunted by the metallic echoes of Nagato's pain and Yahiko's vision. There was something beautiful and broken in these ruins. It mirrored him, and as he patched rooftops and walked through the corridors where leaders had once plotted peace through power, Obito began to realize something deeper. He could no longer just unmake his past, but maybe, just maybe, he could plant seeds that would grow into something better long after he was gone. Conan, too, had changed. There was a patience in her now, born not of surrender, but of resilience. She spoke of Naruto sometimes, and Obito listened closely. Naruto's name, once spoken only in terms of obstacles and threats, now echoed with hope. Obito found himself thinking more and more about the boy with the blue eyes and boundless spirit, the child who had lost so much, yet still believed in people. Naruto had shown even Nagato a sliver of the light he had long buried. What would Naruto do? He sometimes wondered. That thought was foreign once, but it began to feel like a compass. And then the messengers came. A boy and a girl, not older than 14, shinobi from a distant border village far beyond the 5 great nations. They had walked for days, seeking someone who could help. Not a Hokage, not a Kage of any kind, just someone strong, someone who knew what it meant to lose everything. Their home had fallen to a new faction, a splinter group of former Akatsuki remnants, calling themselves the True Dawn. They were small, but ruthless. With the old symbols and none of the vision, they sought only power. They wore the red clouds like costumes, a parody of purpose. Conan's expression darkened when she heard the name, but it was Obito who spoke first. "I'll go." He didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait for agreement. There was a fire in him now, not the fire of vengeance, but of duty. He had created Akatsuki's darkness. It was only right that he now stand between it and those too weak to fight. The journey took days. He moved across rivers and forests in silence, his chakra still suppressed, but his purpose sharp as a blade. Along the way, he met others, survivors from other villages, small pockets of people who had been pushed out or brutalized by this so-called True Dawn. The stories were always the same. Hooded men demanding loyalty, children taken, homes razed. It was all too familiar. Obito saw himself in their fear, in their pain, and it only made him move faster. When he arrived at the edge of the occupied territory, he paused only briefly. He put on a new mask, not to hide, but to honor the fallen. A plain piece of wood carved into a gentle curve with no markings. He wore it like a barrier, not of deception, but of clarity. This wasn't about his identity. It was about the mission. He entered the village at dusk. They were waiting. A dozen shinobi, none of them older than he was when Madara had first found him. Most were barely trained, but their eyes held that same dangerous conviction, the kind born not of wisdom, but of desperation and stolen rhetoric. They tried to speak. They tried to threaten. But Obito didn't argue. He dismantled them with swift, precise movements. He used only what he needed. No firestorms, no elaborate techniques, just enough. Their leader, a brash young man with the Rinnegan inked crudely around his eyes, charged him with a shout about destiny and power. Obito disarmed him in seconds. He broke the false symbols on his cloak and left him unconscious beneath the moonlight. The villagers watched from their homes, stunned. Many expected another tyrant, but Obito left before dawn, after ensuring they had food, medicine, and safety. He asked for nothing. He told them only one thing: "You're free now. Stay that way." Word of his actions began to spread, not just through whispers, but through rumors that trickled into the ears of wandering shinobi, small villages, and even the edges of the hidden leaf. A masked figure, dressed in black, not stealing, not destroying, but saving. Some called him a vigilante. Others called him a ghost of war. But those who saw his eyes knew the truth. He wasn't a specter. He was a man trying to walk backward through fire to find the child he used to be. And back in the rain, Conan waited. When he returned, bruised and silent, she handed him a folded piece of parchment. "From Naruto," she said. He wrote after hearing what happened in the border towns. Obito hesitated, then opened it. The words were short, direct, but filled with warmth. "People can change. I'm glad you're trying. Come to Konoha when you're ready." Obito folded the letter slowly and tucked it inside his cloak. He still wasn't ready. But maybe soon. The seasons began to turn, and with each passing day, the rhythm of Obito's life changed from one of survival to something else, something quieter. He was no longer moving through the world as a shadow seeking redemption. He had begun to live. Not entirely free of guilt, no. That would never be possible. But he was learning to exist outside the walls of his past, to breathe without the constant burn of shame in his lungs. Conan, now acting as the quiet steward of the rain's fragile peace, found herself drawn into a strange companionship with Obito. They didn't speak often, but they worked side by side, cleaning, teaching, defending. She, too, bore wounds that time had not healed. But they had found something like stillness in each other. Not forgiveness, not forgetfulness, just stillness. And that was rare enough to be precious. One morning, as mist curled through the iron alleys of Megakure, Conan approached Obito as he stood overlooking the rooftops. His mask, the smooth wooden one, lay beside him on the ledge. "I had a dream last night," she said. He didn't turn. "Was it peaceful?" She nodded. "Yahiko was in it." He was laughing. Obito glanced toward the horizon, where the storm clouds gathered but never quite broke. "Do you think they'd forgive us? Him and Nagato?" "I don't think that's the question," she replied softly. "I think the better question is, can we forgive ourselves?" Obito said nothing, but the silence held a kind of agreement between them, a shared recognition that redemption was not a destination. It was a road that never ended. Word began to spread more widely now. Obito's small missions had created ripples. The true dawn had crumbled in less than a month after his quiet dismantling of their leadership. The survivors told stories of a masked man who didn't kill unless he had to, who never sought power, who left behind food and medicine instead of fear. Other small villages, those broken by wars, abandoned by larger nations, began to reach out. Obito didn't say no. He traveled to burned-out outposts and hidden enclaves. He negotiated peace between rival clans in the deep forests of the Land of Rivers. He stopped a human trafficking ring near the Wind Country's border without ever being seen. He carried no allegiance, no symbol, and that made him dangerous to those who still sought power, but beloved by those with none. His chakra signature, once a recognizable marker of dread, was now veiled by a technique he had developed through sheer necessity. He wanted no one to know who he was, not until he was ready. And always, Naruto's letter stayed folded in the inner pocket of his cloak. Sometimes, at night, he would read it again, not for instruction, but as a reminder that someone believed in his better self, even after all the horror. But not everyone saw the changing tides as hope. In the shadows of the 5 great nations, whispers began to surface of Obito's survival, of his actions. Some were skeptical, others saw him as a threat. The Raikage, ever brash and unyielding, demanded answers from the Leaf. Tsunade, newly reinstated as Hokage, remained cautious but open-minded. She trusted Naruto's instincts, and Naruto had vouched for Obito. That counted for something. Still, she sent a message. If he is to return, he must come as himself. No masks, no lies. The message reached Obito through Konan, who read it with careful neutrality. He took the letter, read it twice, then folded it beside Naruto's, and for the first time, he allowed himself to wonder what it would mean to return to the Leaf. Not as a ghost, but as a man. Not yet, but soon. And so the journey continued. During a cold winter, Obito was called to a mountain village nearly swallowed by snowfall. Bandits had been terrorizing the roads, targeting anyone who tried to deliver supplies. When he arrived, he found the village nearly starved, their walls battered by wind and fear. He didn't announce himself. He simply went into the woods. Over the course of 3 nights, the bandits disappeared, one by one. Obito spared their lives, but he shattered their weapons, destroyed their camps, and left them bound with notes pinned to their chests. Leave and do not return. This village is under protection. By the time he returned, the villagers stared in awe. Some called him a kami. Others whispered the name Uchiha like a prayer. He offered no correction. Instead, he taught them how to trap game in the snow, how to reinforce their homes. He spent a week with them. No more. Then he vanished. But something was changing inside him. The more good he tried to do, the more he began to feel the pull of the place he had run from. The hidden Leaf. And not just the place. The people. Kakashi's name lingered in his thoughts now. Rin's memory no longer brought only agony. It was like a soft ache now, not a wound. A reminder that he had once been loved. And there was Naruto, the boy who had become a man. Obito wondered what he would say to him if they met again. Would he apologize? Would he bow? Would he even be able to look him in the eye? He didn't know. But as spring began to break the winter frost and the cherry blossoms whispered in the wind once more, Obito made a decision. It was time to go home. Not for forgiveness, not for absolution, but because a part of him still belonged there. And maybe, just maybe, there was still something he could give. The decision to return wasn't something Obito took lightly. The hidden leaf was not merely a village. It was memory incarnate. It held the smell of old dreams and the echoes of children he once called friends. The streets, the rooftops, the forest paths, all of them had watched him grow, falter, vanish. And now, as he stood at the edge of the fire country, cloaked in gray mist and silence, he felt as though the trees themselves could sense his presence, whispering warnings to the world he had once betrayed. He didn't walk through the front gates. That would have been arrogance or foolishness. Instead, he moved through the forest with the careful patience of a man not looking to be forgiven, but to be understood. He entered through the outskirts, slipping between shadows and rooftops, watching the village in a hush of memory and wonder. Children played. Vendors shouted. The Hokage monument looked unchanged, save for the new face carved beside Tsunada's, the face of Naruto Uzumaki. It made Obito stop for a long time, watching that stone face grinning eternally toward the horizon filled something inside him. A strange warmth, bittersweet and impossible to hold. He didn't go to the Hokage Tower. Not yet. That wasn't his destination. He went to a quiet street not far from the training fields, where a small wooden house stood with a garden full of weeds and fallen petals. It had once belonged to the Uchiha. Now it belonged to no one. But Obito knelt in the grass, brushing dust from the old porch with trembling hands. He stayed there for an hour, saying nothing, doing nothing, just being. Eventually, he felt a presence behind him, soft, familiar chakra. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. "Kakashi," he said, "I didn't think I'd see you here. I wasn't sure I'd come." Silence stretched between them, long and gentle. Kakashi stood still, no weapons drawn, no threats, just watching. "You're not wearing the mask," Kakashi said. "No," Obito answered. It didn't feel right anymore. "You've been busy. The reports, they're hard to believe. I never expected anyone to believe them." Kakashi took a step closer. "You saved the lives of 12 children during a raid in Grass Country. You stopped a civil war in the Frost Valley. And a few weeks ago, you escorted a convoy of healers through rogue territory, unarmed." Obito tilted his head. And Naruto's been fighting for you this whole time." That made Obito pause. "Has he?" he asked softly. "He thinks you're trying to make things right." Obito looked at his own hands. I'm not sure that's possible. Kakashi sat beside him without a word. They remained there like that, two former teammates, aged by pain, shaped by loss, staring at a village that once defined their lives. "You should see him," Kakashi said eventually. "He won't stop smiling these days." Obito's voice barely rose above a whisper. "I don't know what I'd say." "You don't have to say anything. Just be there." That night, Obito stayed in the outskirts, in an abandoned watchtower overlooking the northern wall. He couldn't sleep, though he tried. He thought of Rin, of Madara, of Nagato and Konan, of the bodies left behind, and the lives spared because of new choices. He didn't think he deserved rest, but he was starting to understand that sometimes rest wasn't about deserving. It was about continuing. By morning, the message came. Naruto wanted to meet. Not in the village, but in the forest clearing near the river, the same spot where Team Minato once trained long ago. Obito agreed. He arrived first, of course. Old habits. He stood by the river, watching the current pull fallen leaves across the surface. And when he heard the footsteps, he didn't turn immediately. "Thanks for coming," Naruto said behind him. Obito turned slowly, and for the first time, he looked at the boy he had once tried to destroy. Naruto was taller, broader, but the eyes, those unrelenting, burning blue eyes, were the same. "You look like him," Obito said. Naruto smiled. "People say that, but I think I've got a bit of my mom in me, too." Obito chuckled, and it surprised them both. There was no ceremony, no long apology, just quiet understanding. "I don't expect forgiveness," Obito said, "but I wanted you to know I chose a different path because of you." Naruto's gaze didn't waver. "I didn't change you. You chose to change. That's stronger." Obito felt something uncoil in his chest. They sat together beside the river, not as enemies, not as savior and sinner, but as two men who had seen too much, lost too much, and somehow still carried light within them. Naruto told him about the village, about how things were changing, about Boruto and Sarada and the new generation that had only known stories of war. "You could help them," Naruto said. "You don't have to hide." Obito looked at his reflection in the water. "I don't know if I belong." "You do," Naruto replied. "Maybe not as the man you were, but as the one you've become." Obito didn't answer, but he didn't leave either. He stayed until dusk, and when he did finally rise, it was not to disappear. It was to walk back with Naruto, step for step, into the village that had once been his home. The return to Konoha was not marked with fanfare. There were no cheering crowds, no dramatic pronouncements, just quiet footsteps on stone, wary glances from villagers, and the subtle shift in atmosphere that followed Obito Uchiha wherever he went. His presence in the hidden leaf stirred emotions in every direction: fear, confusion, anger, curiosity. He did not blame them. He walked with it, through it, like a man walking through fog, letting it settle on his shoulders without complaint. Naruto walked beside him that first morning, his presence a kind of silent shield. Kakashi joined them shortly after. Together, they made a strange sight, past, present, and what might have been, moving through streets that remembered them all differently. Obito wore simple clothing now, no mask, no cloak, only humility. He accepted no grand housing or privileges. Instead, he moved into the abandoned Uchiha district, restoring one of the half-collapsed buildings with his own hands. Brick by brick, he worked. It was how he began to rebuild himself, through effort, not entitlement. He spoke little, but he listened. To Irika, who stopped by one day with a bag of groceries and stories about Naruto's academy years. To Konohamaru, who visited unannounced with a dozen questions and unshakable awe. To Tsunade, who scrutinized him over tea, folding her arms and narrowing her eyes, yet allowing the conversation to continue long after her glare had softened. The elders were less forgiving. Danzo might have been gone, but his legacy lived on in suspicion and tradition. They demanded surveillance, restrictions, conditional freedom. Naruto opposed it. So did Kakashi. But Obito said nothing. He agreed to the terms, knowing that trust was not given freely. It was earned, slowly, over time. It was Shikamaru who, days later, offered him the strangest kind of peace. "We don't need another war," he said, seated beside Obito in the garden of the restored Uchiha home. "We need people who understand what war takes." Obito looked at him, curious. "And you think I do?" Shikamaru exhaled a thin trail of smoke from a cigarette. "I think you understand it more than most. And that kind of pain, it teaches things textbooks never will." So began Obito's slow reintegration. Not as a shinobi, not yet, but as a counselor of sorts, someone the younger generation could ask questions of, someone who could explain how peace is fragile and how ideology, unchecked, can blind the soul. He gave lectures to small groups, taught sparsely attended seminars. Most days, he only spoke a few words, but his presence was felt. And still, he dreamed. Dreams of Rin never left him. Sometimes, he saw her in the forest, smiling. Sometimes, he heard her laughter in the wind. But more often, he dreamt of the boy he had been, carefree, clumsy, full of fire, the child who wanted to be Hokage. And now, when he woke from those dreams, he no longer felt sorrow. He felt drive, a reason to keep walking. Then came the day when Kakashi brought him a message. "There's unrest near the border," he said. "A rogue faction calling themselves the Ashen Blade. Ex-Missing 9. Mercenaries. Dangerous, but scattered. The mission team could use guidance." Obito looked up from his garden. You want me to go? I want you to choose. Obito said nothing at first. Then he stood, wiped the dirt from his hands, and nodded. When do we leave? The journey wasn't long, 3 days by foot. The team accompanying them was young, Genin and newly promoted Chunin, nervous but eager. They looked at Obito with curiosity, not fear. One of them, a girl named Aibara, asked him what it was like fighting during the Fourth War. He answered with honesty. Loud, he said. But the silence after, that's louder. The battle against the Ashen Blade was small, contained. But Obito moved like a ghost on the field, precise, controlled, never excessive. He protected his squad mates without hesitation, absorbing blows meant for others, disarming without killing, subduing without cruelty. One enemy, a former Leaf shinobi, paused mid-attack when he recognized him. Obito, the man gasped. You were dead. Obito's reply was quiet. Not anymore. They returned victorious, without casualties. The village took notice. More missions followed. Always with younger shinobi, always with Obito as a silent guide. And slowly, the murmurs began to shift, from fear to curiosity, from doubt to acceptance. One night, Naruto visited him again, bringing ramen and moonlight. You're making a difference, Naruto said between bites. I'm trying, Obito replied. You're succeeding. Obito looked out at the stars. Sometimes I wonder if I had been raised just a little differently. If someone had said the right thing at the right time, maybe I'd never have needed to fall. Naruto smiled gently. But then you wouldn't be here, and we need you now. Obito didn't respond. He didn't need to. The warmth in his chest was enough. Time in the hidden leaf did not stop for any one person. The days passed like falling leaves, steady and without drama. Yet for Obito, each moment felt new. Each sunrise greeted him like a second chance, and each quiet night reminded him how far he had come. What once was burden now felt like responsibility. What once was isolation had softened into solitude. He was no longer a shadow, lurking in the corner of history. He was part of the present, slowly building a better future, one small act at a time. There were no statues to his name, no medals, no place carved into the monuments, but Obito found he did not need them. The thanks of a saved genin, the trust of a former enemy, the soft nod from an elder who once glared with suspicion. These were his new rewards. They were real, quiet, and more valuable than any public praise. On the anniversary of the war's end, a gathering was held in Konoha. Not a celebration, exactly, more a remembrance. The young gathered to listen. The old came to remember. Candles lined the streets, each one representing a life lost. Obito stood at the edge of the crowd, unnoticed by many, yet present. He wore the same plain cloak he always did, and he did not step forward to speak. But he listened. Naruto, took the stage and spoke of unity, of forgiveness, of strength through kindness. His voice reached across the crowd, not as a leader demanding attention, but as a friend inviting healing. When Naruto finished, he turned briefly, eyes scanning the crowd until they settled on Obito. He gave the faintest nod. Obito nodded back. That night, as people began to disperse and the candlelight flickered out, Obito walked the quiet streets alone. He passed the memorial stone, the same one he had once been carved into, his name etched in the fallen. He looked at it now with no bitterness, only a strange kind of reverence. In a way, the old Obito had died. The name on that stone still belonged to the boy who ran with dreams in his eyes, and a flower for Rin clutched in his hand. But the man standing now before the stone was something else. Someone rebuilt. Eventually, Kakashi joined him there. "I never thanked you," Kakashi said, hands deep in his pockets. "For what?" Obito asked. "For stepping away from the path Madara gave you, for choosing your own." Obito didn't answer immediately. The silence between them was soft, familiar. "I didn't do it alone," he finally said. "I had help. From you. From Naruto. Even from Rin. In memory." Kakashi gave a half smile. "Well, that's the thing about redemption. It's not something you walk into alone, but you still have to walk." Obito nodded. "I'm still walking." In the months that followed, Obito was offered a more formal role, an advisor to the Hokage, someone who could help navigate delicate diplomacy and help integrate rogue elements that still roamed the lands. He accepted the role without pride, only purpose. His past gave him insight few others had. He knew the languages of manipulation, of isolation, of desperation, and now he used them not to harm, but to heal. On a quiet day, far from the village, he visited the ruins of the hideout where Madara once trained him. The place was still and broken. Moss grew between the stones. Vines curled around shattered statues. He stood there for a long time, just breathing. "Your plan failed, old man," he whispered into the wind. "But I'm still here." He left a single camellia on the ground before departing, a symbol not of forgiveness, but of closure. Back in the village, Naruto had begun preparations for the next Chunin exams. Obito offered to help train a squad that showed promise. Among them was Ibara, the same Genin from his earlier missions. She had grown stronger, more confident. During a spar, she landed a blow on Obito, surprising even herself. "You're holding back," she grinned. "Maybe," Obito replied. "Or maybe you're just better than I was at your age." They laughed. It felt good. Later that week, Obito stood on a hill overlooking the village. He had returned to this spot often in the early days, but now he saw it with different eyes. Where once he saw reminders of pain, now he saw potential. Where once he imagined destruction, now he envisioned growth. He wasn't a hero, He wasn't a legend, but he was living. When night fell, he sat alone beneath a tree, watching the stars. And for the first time in years, he closed his eyes, not because he was haunted, but because he was at peace. Sleep came easily, dreams softer, no longer shadows of the past, but whispers of a future he might yet help shape. He had fallen, he had risen, and now he simply was. Obito Uchiha, alive.